What's up guys, today I'm going to show you the best all-wheel drive drift cars in GTA 5. So this video is entirely dedicated to showing you guys my top 10 picks for the most fun and capable all-wheel drive drift cars in GTA 5. Now this list is going to be unranked and it's based on my own personal preference, but if you have any other all-wheel drive cars you'd like to drift that aren't showcased in this video, feel free to drop them in the comments so I can give them a shot. Also, definitely stick around the channel for part 3 of my in-depth drifting tutorial, because in that video I'll have a dedicated guide about drifting all-wheel drive cars, which should help you guys take advantage of all the cars that I show in this video. So with that all out of the way, let's get right into the cars. Alright boys, kicking off this list is the ASERI Retro Custom. Yes, this iconic car finally drifts now that it has access to low grip tires. This car has awesome power with also a pretty decent mid-drive speed boost. As for handling, it definitely does feel a bit more grippy, obviously because of the nature of the car, but the car still is pretty loose to keep those longer slides going. It cannot hold a crazy amount of angle either, but it does still feel on par with a lot of the more well-known rear-wheel drive drift cars, and it is pretty capable for both longer corners and more tighter technical layouts as well. As for value, it is great because it has plenty of customization options for a fair price, and it's a pretty awesome drift car. And next up we have a really oddball car, the Coil Raiden. This car has an insane amount of power and torque because it's electric obviously, so that definitely helps keep those longer drifts going. You just need to be able to control that power. Moving into handling, this car does feel very balanced. It does feel pretty similar to a rear-wheel drive car in terms of angle and steering response. However, because the car is extremely powerful and because some of that power obviously is going to the front wheels, you will need to make extensive use of both the normal brakes and the handbrake to keep the car in a drift without immediately straightening out. Because of that, it's definitely better for those longer corners and is definitely not for those tighter, more technical drifts unless you practice with it a lot. As for value, it does offer decent value because it has okay customization and is a very capable and fun drift car, although it is super expensive. And next up we have the iconic Declasse Drift Tampa. This car has great power. It is a bit laggy like we saw with the Picador, but still this car has enough torque to hit a good mid-drive speed boost to keep those wheels spinning. As for handling, it feels like it should have when it originally released like 5 years ago. It's got extremely smooth handling because it has so little grip, but still holds a lot of angle, and the power distribution allows it to hold both longer and tighter drifts very easily. As for value, it is pretty good overall. It's more expensive and does definitely lack customization, but is still a very iconic car that actually drifts really well. And next up we have the criminally underrated Dinka Jester or Jester race car. This car is extremely powerful and torquey, and it's got a fairly easy mid-drive speed boost to hit and is actually pretty reminiscent of a lot of rear-wheel drive cars. As for handling, it is pretty responsive and very agile, so it's quick to initiate a slide and transition with relative ease, but the car still can be pretty grippy and can straighten out without enough steering input. However, if you give it a little bit too much steering input, the car is very prone to oversteer because it's got a short wheelbase and a rear-mounted engine, so you will need to be very careful with that. However, it is still pretty usable for both smaller and larger corners once you get the hang of it. As for value, it is great because the car is fairly cheap to buy and upgrade, and it drifts really well even though it does have minimal customization. And next up we have the Emperor Vector. This car has really good torque but is on the laggier side like the Declasse Drift Tampa because it's heavier obviously, although the mid-drive speed boost will still give you the kick that you need to hold out those longer drifts. As for handling, this car does feel really natural and smooth. It does have the weight and handling of a typical rear-wheel drive drift car, but obviously this one has more grip. The Vector does hold good angle too, which when you combine that with the amount of power it makes it really good for both tighter and longer drifts. As for value, it is pretty decent. This car obviously has plenty of customization since it's from the Tuners DLC, and it's a pretty good drift car, but this all comes at a very high price tag. Next up we have the Karen Sultan RS. This car has extremely good power and a very strong mid-drive speed boost that makes it feel a lot like those higher power rear-wheel drive drift cars. As for handling, it handles really good and smooth, again very reminiscent of a proper rear-wheel drive drift car. It does hold decent angle but can be fairly twitchy and prone to oversteer, mainly due to that lack of front grip and because it's got a shorter wheelbase and is also a pretty narrow car. However, once you get the hang of that and learn to be careful with your steering inputs, you can use it for both low and high speed drifts, which is awesome. As for value, it is pretty good. It has great customization for an okay price and also offers good driftability as well. And next up we have the Obey 9F or the 9F Cabrio. This car has really good power. It is a bit laggier because of that lack of grip, but it still has enough torque to keep the wheels spinning when you engage that mid-drive speed boost. As for handling, it feels extremely smooth. It has very little overall grip, as I said, but the softer suspension helps keep the car stable and predictable. Overall, it feels very similar to the Dinka Jester given that it's a rear engine car, but in my opinion the 9F is a bit longer and heavier, which enables it to consistently handle both low and high speed drifts. As for value, it is really good. In my opinion, the car looks amazing, although it is lacking customization, plus it's very cheap and offers great driftability. Next up we have the Pegassi Tempesta. This car is extremely powerful and very torquey, which enables it to have a very strong mid-drive speed boost for those longer drifts. As for handling, it does feel surprisingly smooth considering that it's a rear engine car that's very lightweight and it has a shorter wheelbase. Because of this, the car is a little bit more prone to oversteer, but it still holds a really good amount of angle. It does also have a bit more grip, so you will need to be a bit more aggressive when entering corners and trying to keep those longer, higher speed slides going. Overall though, it is very balanced and good for both low and high speed corners. As for value, it is pretty good. Although the car is very expensive and doesn't have a ton of customization, it is still an awesome drift car. Alright, next up we have the Ocelot Jugular. This car has awesome power and a very torquey engine, which enables it to have a very strong mid-drive speed boost. As for handling, it does feel pretty good. It does hold a decent amount of angle and is agile enough to transition pretty quickly. However, it is a bit more snappy and prone to oversteer, so you will need to be careful when transitioning so you don't spin the car out. The amount of power that the car puts to the front wheels can occasionally help with that oversteer issue too, which will make it pretty good for both smaller technical drifts as well as wider and longer corners. Now as for value, it is pretty good because it's a fairly balanced four-door car that offers really good driftability and decent customization, although it is a bit more expensive. And last but not least, we have the very weird Pfister 811. This car is actually extremely powerful and is probably the easiest all-wheel drive car in GTA 5 to do the mid-drive speed boost, and obviously the mid-drive speed boost is strong enough to keep really long slides going with ease. As for handling, this car is fairly smooth and easy to drift, and again feels very similar to a more powerful rear-wheel drive drift car like the Banshee 900R. The Pfister 811 can hold decent angle, but because it's a very narrow car with a rear-mounted engine, it is more prone to oversteer, so you will need to be careful with your steering inputs. Overall, it is a pretty agile car, so it can be used for both smaller technical drifts as well as very long high-speed corners. And then finally, for value, it does have decent value overall. It isn't the best in terms of customization and is a very expensive car, but it is still very fun to drift. Alright guys, so that will conclude my list of the top 10 picks for the best all-wheel drive drift cars in GTA 5. As always, feel free to let me know what you think of these cars down in the comments, and also leave any other suggestions for all-wheel drive cars that you'd like me to test out. Also, stay tuned to the channel for more GTA 5 drifting content coming very soon. Thank you all so much for watching this video, and have an amazing day.